So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about well-being, not so much as a pursuit for individuals, but as something that the EIS sees very much as being a collective endeavour. And there are a number of areas that are around you as teachers, and as employees, that are there as the foundation of many aspects of your wellbeing. And I'm just going to talk through, in broad terms, what each of these are, so that you begin to get a picture of, how as an individual your wellbeing is being protected by certain policy, procedure, legislation, and frameworks, and indeed your contract. These things already been in place, but also how the union or our union can assist you in going after more positive health wellbeing outcomes for yourself and indeed for your colleagues, as many of you have expressed an interest in doing. So there can be a temptation to consider wellbeing as a matter of individual responsibility, something that's in the hands of individuals alone. And while this might be true to a greater or a lesser extent when we're not at work, when it comes to workplace wellbeing, it's very much about a collective approach. And indeed, a lot of responsibility for our wellbeing rests with our employers, whoever they happen to be. This makes clearer sense when we think about wellbeing as health and wellbeing, and makes even more sense when we think of it as health and safety and wellbeing. And of course, health also means mental health as well. So employers have responsibilities with regards to this, responsibilities that are framed in legal and contractual or policy terms, as outlined here in this first slide. And as I said, I'm going to talk about each of these very briefly so that we get a sense of the context within which we're working. And as I said, importantly, the EIS encourages a collective approach to wellbeing. We don't see it that teachers should be flying solo in trying to navigate workplace wellbeing. We and other unions are here as co-pilots, and these are the levers that we can use to protect and promote teacher wellbeing alongside the kinds of self-care activities that Pauline will talk about later. So we were really keen that you didn't have a sense from the EIS presentation this afternoon that it's all down to you. We wanted it to be very, very clear that there are certain parameters and processes and policy and legislation and all of that are in operation within the workplace that are also there very much to protect your wellbeing. So you're absolutely not having to fly solo. Can you change slides, please, Pauline? So the first thing that I wanted to talk about was health and safety legislation. All employees are covered by this. And you'll be aware of this because you'll have health and safety reps at work. Whatever your workplace is, you'll have health and safety reps at work, or you'll have reps who talk about health and safety legislation and what's already in place to protect you. But for the purposes of this afternoon, it's important to point out that this legislation has evolved over the years to include mental health as well as physical health protections, and that's the piece, I suppose, that relates much more closely to that broader sense of well-being beyond just sort of like physical safety. So employers have a legal duty to protect employees from stress at work by carrying out risk assessments and acting on them. And those stress risk assessments cover each of those 6 areas that are outlined there within the slide. So the demands that are upon employees, how much control they have over their work and the pace of their work and so on, what support networks are in place to enable people to do their jobs to the best of their ability, what the climate is like in terms of relationships and so on, and the extent to which people understand their roles and the extent to which people are supported to to manage processes of change. So there's quite a sort of like careful construction, if you like, around risk assessments. These are advised by the Health and Safety Executive, and for anyone looking for additional information about those, there's a link, or not a link, a web address at the bottom of the slide, and we'll share all the slides with you after the session. Can we move on to the next one, please, Pauline? Also, in terms of legislation, there's the Equality Act, which came into force in 2010. It might come as a surprise to some, but the Equality Act covers everyone in the United Kingdom because we all have protected characteristics. The extent to which these apply vary from context to context, but we all share protected characteristics, so we're all covered by this legislation. And the fundamental aim of this legislation is to protect people from discrimination, harassment and victimisation, which, it's a no-brainer that these would be things that would be real eroders of people's well-being at work and and certainly within the EIS, we look to aspects of equality legislation and the associated public sector equality duty when we're looking at cases of discrimination and so on. And in large part, when we're making those cases, we make a link with people's well-being and the impact of discrimination, etc., on their mental health. So it's important that people understand the extent of the protections that they have in terms of the Equality Act. And also the fact that employers, and certainly local authority employers, are bound by the terms of that legislation. Okay, next slide please, Pauline. Moving away from legal protections, the Scottish Government has worked with trade unions and employers in recent years to develop the Fair Work framework. And this is something that employers sign up to rather being legally compelled to abide by. But it is important to say that all public bodies in Scotland, so that's local authorities who are largely our employers, are encouraged to work with trade unions to adopt the terms of the framework, which, as you can see, encompass areas that are critical underpinnings of wellbeing at work. So effective voice, having a say, opportunities, that, access to opportunities on an equal footing, to all other employees, having job security, having a sense of fulfilment, a sense of satisfaction that your work has meaning and purpose, and finally that all are treated with dignity and free from bullying and harassment, with respect being the kind of all-encompassing principle around that. So again, this is something that the EIS would refer to, perhaps, when we're talking about well-being and the entitlements of our members to good well-being at work, and we would see all of these aspects of the Fair Work framework as being contributing factors to the extent to which people will experience good well-being at work or not. Thanks, Pauline. The next one, please. Moving on to contractual matters, in terms of contracts, the main elements that can help you and the union to look after your wellbeing at work, the main element rather is the working time agreement. So that's the collective agreement that's reached at school level between the union or unions, if you have more than one representative in your school, and the head teacher. And the working time agreement, you'll know, is usually signed off over the summer term, with a view to coming into operation in the new academic session. So there can be a wee bit of a risk that when we get into the thick of a new term and the buzz and the rhythm and the buzz of it all, you can kind of forget what the terms of the working time agreement were that were agreed a way back maybe in May or June before the summer holidays. But it really is important that we keep an eye on the working time agreement, because it's a key means by which we can control workload and therefore do things that are, that are supportive of our well-being rather than eroding of our well-being. So we really should try not to let, to let I suppose the effort around all of that slip. It's kind of like, it reminds me actually of like when drivers are driving, and when they're driving any kind of route, they keep an eye on the speed limit and they keep an eye on their speedometer to help keep themselves and others safe, to make sure that they're not going too fast, in any given situation, such that it would put either their life or the lives of others at risk, or other kind of pose other kind of danger. So excessive speed on the roads brings an obvious health and safety risk to well-being, a physical risk in terms of well-being, but excessive workload and excessive working hours also bring risks. At work, a different kind of risk. It's not the same immediate kind of physical threat as would be posed by a speeding driver, but nonetheless, to consistently work over and above the terms of our contracts does pose a risk to our well-being, and it's one that we would do well to pay attention to. So, we would say that the working time agreement acts a bit like the speed limiting tools that we use when we're driving. So the speed limit signs that are out on the roads and the speedometer that we have inside our vehicles. We should keep our eye on them. We should keep our eye on the working time agreement to keep ourselves and others safe. And well at work, to keep ourselves and others safe and well at work. It's teachers' contractual right to do this, and unions like us support teachers in ensuring that that right is upheld. There shouldn't be any hesitancy about going back to the working time agreement to see what it says about what we should be doing as collective activity in any one week, how much of that collective activity we should be doing in 1 week, of a particular kind, whether it be reporting, whether it be parents' nights, whether it be, some other big piece of development work that we're collaborating with colleagues around. And there should be no issue at all in bringing to the attention of our colleagues where we think that maybe additional asks or demands have crept in over and above, what has already been captured within the working time agreement. It's kind of like we have a responsibility to ourselves to do it, and we have a responsibility to our colleagues to do it. And as we kind of alluded to at the beginning, that actually has an impact on the experiences of the young people that we're teaching as well. We have to have a sustainable approach to how we're carrying out our work throughout the year, and the working time agreement is a main tool to try and help us to do that. Thanks, Pauline. If we can move on to slide 6, please, or the next one. And finally, in policy terms, we've had a more recent development in the onset of the empowerment agenda to help support wellbeing at work. So this is not so much directly as indirectly, because all of the elements of this actually, we would say, underpin an empowered school culture, which generally impacts positively on teacher wellbeing. So we would want to see collegiality, we would want to see collaboration, professional voice and agency, shared decision making, distributed leadership, teacher-led research and inquiry. And all of this links back to actually, what we talked about a few slides before in relation to the principles of the Fair Work framework. There's a lot of overlap between what was envisaged within the Fair Work framework and what's been captured in terms of, a healthy, positive, empowered school culture where you've got teacher voice and agency sitting comfortably alongside and on equal footing to participation by other, key actors within the school community. And it's that sense of shared endeavour and having a right to share ideas, a right to be involved in decision making, a right to share thinking. It's all of these things that we think have the potential, the real potential to lead to enhancements overall for teacher wellbeing. It's important to underline too that this agenda is shared by unions, so all of the unions that are signed up to this, the Scottish Government, local authorities, Education Scotland, all who've got a main interest in education in Scotland have been pushing forward with the agenda around school empowerment. To some extent, it's maybe been set out of kilter a little bit because of the the disruption of the pandemic. That said, the EIS has still been on message around the importance of empowerment within that context. And in fact, a number of people actually have commented that they feel that things have moved on well and in a positive direction in terms of empowerment because of the way that everyone has had to collaborate and work together in the face of adversity. So we're hopeful that we can make further inroads and take further strides towards this, hopefully as we enter a period of recovery. So just to finish off on that, the research shows that where teacher wellbeing is strong, so too are pupil outcomes. So again, this kind of harks back to this idea about self-care and looking after yourself and prioritising your wellbeing, not being selfish, not being wholly selfish and self-interested. It is inextricably linked to pupil outcomes as well. So again, by prioritising your well-being, looking after yourself and working alongside the union to do that, you're also helping to look after colleagues and in turn ensure that the outcomes for our young people are as strong as they can possibly be. So yeah, final slide, Pauline, thanks. So if we were having this session in person, which of course unfortunately we aren't, we would be giving you all badges, maybe something that looked something like this. And we think that this kind of says what the EIS thinks about wellbeing. Wellbeing is something that we work together on in the interests of every teacher. It's a collective, it's a club. We might not have designed it exactly this way, but I thought this was quite a good way of summarising it. It's about employers and government having a significant role to play in laying the foundations for good health and safety and wellbeing at work, and on maintaining those foundations ongoingly. And it's about individual teachers playing their part in looking after themselves and their colleagues. And it's about the EIS and other unions working with members, employers and government to promote and protect teacher health and wellbeing for the benefit of all. being part of a union that very much believes teacher wellbeing matters. You're taking healthy steps towards improving wellbeing at work for yourself and for your colleagues, so you're most definitely deserving of a badge, at least for that.